Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, Star Wars, The Godfather, Lord of the Rings, Great Things Come in Threes. We're talking our favorite Nintendo trilogies. It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellis, joined as always by my co-host Mark Mitchell, who was making me laugh towards the end of that introduction.
You were making me laugh because when you were doing the grand pronouncements of the trilogies,
yes,
you were switching hands that you were pronouncing with.
I was gesticulating far and wide.
Yeah,
Star Wars.
But then you had to hand the mic off to yourself each time you did. It was great. I enjoyed it.
There's a whole element of theatricality that only you get to see.
Yeah, that's true. We're very expressive.
Very much so. Mark, how are you?
I'm doing really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. I would also say that I am doing well. We have these glasses of water. It's making me happy. I'm happy to have it. I feel hydrated.
Did you know the room temperature water it does a better job of cooling you down than cold water?
Of cooling you down or of hydrating you?
Of cooling you down. So if you're really hot, and you want to drink water to cool down, drink room temperature water. It'll actually lower your body temperature faster. I'm assuming that's because your body has to do more work to warm cold water anyways.
Right, to make it something. So I guess maybe hydrate is also part of that. When I was living in Hawaii at one point, I stayed out in the sun for too long because I was not used to living that close to the equator. I was used to living in Wisconsin. I tried to drink a lot of water to cool myself down, but I drank ice cold water because I was like, colder water will be better for hot Patrick.
Right.
And then I threw it all up.
Oh, gross.
I mean, it's not that gross because it's just water.
No, that's
also everyone throws.
Gross.
Everyone throws up, Mark.
When's the last time you threw up?
Actually, a pretty long time ago. I used to throw up a lot more before I stopped eating meat.
Oh,
I used to be kind of a regular vomiter.
Oh, wow.
Which is kind of a gross thing about me. But from middle school until after college, I would probably get a headache and vomit about once a month.
You got meat sick.
Yeah, I got meat sick.
That's crazy.
And now that doesn't happen to me anymore.
Yeah, that's great.
And I know that that's not for everyone, and that's a personal, but that's why I still don't eat meat. Is because
it makes total sense to me.
I don't want to be put out and vomit all the time.
Yeah, makes total sense.
So we're talking about vomit here. This is what you've come to expect from your Nintendo podcast. If you like the show, please rate and review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Or anywhere that you get the show. We really appreciate it. Everybody who has left a review for us. It helps us out a lot, helps other people find the show.
So. Another good way to help people find the show is to tweet about us or post about us on Facebook. We are at NinCart Society and just Nintendo Cartridge Society, respectively, on those two platforms. We love interacting with y'all. It is a good time. And if you have any other feedback or any questions for us, you can email us at nintendocartridgesociety@gmail.com. Mark, without further ado, let's get into our main topic of the day, which is, of course, our favorite Nintendo trilogies. A couple stipulations. We're doing this, right, based on the idea that Super Mario Odyssey is the conclusion of a decades-long trilogy that began with Super Mario 64, had the intermediary step of Super Mario Sunshine, and is now done with Odyssey.
Yeah, you could say that the Super Mario series is a lot like Indiana Jones, where it had a stellar debut, a kind of more controversial second chapter, and then a third chapter that went back to what worked so well in the first one.
That's right.
Kind of embellished on it.
And so as you'll probably be quick to point out, hey, wait a minute, there were 3D Mario games in the interim there. What about Galaxy? What about 3D World? We're not forgetting about those.
Oh, no, we remember.
We remember. we're saying that we can define a trilogy more or less however we want. Just that they need to be successive games in what is more or less the same series. And each one needs to improve on the previous or be informed by the previous in like a real or meaningful way. So some of these trilogies are going to be the definition of trilogy is a little bit more flexible.
Yeah,
right?
I have one that I think pretty much breaks all of those rules, but is near and dear to my heart. And so I wanted to include it so we could talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, and I think and look, if this turns into an argument about whether or not we should include them in our pantheon of trilogies, all the better, I say. Yes?
Yes.
Right. And so the other stipulation is that they need to be featured on Nintendo consoles, even prominently featured on like strongly associated with Nintendo consoles. Yes?
Yes.
All right. Mark, I shall go first.
Okay, great.
My first entry is going to be the Super Mario 3D series. So Super Mario 3D Land on the DS, or the 3DS rather, Super Mario 3D World on the Wii U, and to round out the trilogy, Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker.
Oh, okay, I was wondering where this third one was going to come in.
Right. I guess this doesn't apply to this one, but all these games must have seen North American releases as well. So the Super Mario 3D Land, I think, is a really fun game. It invents a new kind of Mario game, still like course-based 3D game. I guess Galaxy sort of is too, but it's it's different.
Well, especially with the Land? Are you talking Land? Or
Yeah,
one?
I'm talking Land, the one
okay.
on the 3DS. So which is still like a single player experience. But World on the Wii U truly is the Empire Strikes Back of this trilogy, in that it takes everything that worked about the original and makes it so much more interesting and so much like wider and thicker. It's just a so much more complete experience. And is a game that is like a total shame is going to be orphaned on the Wii U forever, right? That like no one will ever. It'll find a way to some other platform at some point. But is so much of that gameplay just like blown up to like crazy levels, and with 4 players simultaneous, 5 playable characters. It's just such a good time and such a good game.
Something we talked about a little bit last week in our Super Mario Odyssey episode was how, we want to see another like 2D Mario, like a new Super Mario Brothers, maybe not in that style.
Yeah.
But another like return to 2D Mario. We want that series to continue, just like we want that like Super Mario 64 and Odyssey series to continue. I think it'd be interesting to also have this third branch that's more like a 3D world.
Yeah.
Like they're all they're all compelling. They're all super fun. You might be more of a fan of one than the other, but I think they're all interesting, and I wish Nintendo had the bandwidth to like pursue all 3.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm fine with the names of all these games being Super Mario whatever. But like it's almost a bummer that all 3 of them have the exact same identity in that way, because they play so differently. Like it almost makes me wish that there was like a split early on, and they were like, no, these are Luigi games and these are, Waluigi games.
Right, because then they could like continue to persist theoretically and not like compete for those Mario resources.
Right. Oh, those sweet, sweet Mario resources. And then the capper on that is the Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker, which is maybe more of like a dark horse cap to the trilogy, because the Captain Toad levels were introduced in Super Mario 3D World. And it's sort of like a mini game, and Treasure Tracker is again that concept blown out to its biggest possible iteration, and it's so cute and has so much of the personality of the first 2 games, but is really is directly informed by 3D World. So that one's I feel like there's a little bit of like a horseshoe shape or like a left turn in there. But that's gonna round out my first trilogy.
One thing that is really fun to watch with as the Mario games have become like I guess like as the graphical fidelity has improved, as like they become more HD and more expressive, they have just become cuter
Yes.
and cuter
Yeah.
and more enjoyable. But I was actually reading something that was really interesting today about the development of Galaxy and forgive me, I can't remember the uh, person who composed the majority of the music for those games. But Koji Kondo did, I think, like 4 tracks, and the rest of the tracks were composed by this other person.
Mm-hmm.
And when he first started composing music for it, he had like more of a it was more cute. And when he brought it to Koji Kondo, he was like, "No, this is all wrong. Mario isn't cute. Mario is cool." And so he had to,
That's interesting.
when he went back and
it's also true. Mario is adorable, but he's cool too. Yeah.
So when he went back and like was composing for the rest of the game, he said that he really struggled with it, and it took him some time to understand how to write music for Super Mario, because I think there is this like really like cute and fun aesthetic. And but for me anyways, I think Nintendo does a really good job of walking that thin line to not being like overly saccharine,
right, not
like
cloying.
like the Yoshi games
Mm-hmm.
can be in a fine way, like not in a bad way, but Mario isn't that,
right,
even though it is like fun and joyful,
which can even like strengthen my like awe factor, you know, where I'm like, oh, I love it. It's Mahito Yakota is the composer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And but I think that's why like Treasure Tracker or Captain Toad, is that what it is? Yeah,
Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker. Yeah.
I think that's why that game is so much fun, is because of course it's cute and adorable, but they don't let that become the game.
Right. Yes. All right, Mark. Let's hear your first trilogy.
Okay, my first trilogy is pretty classic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going Metroid Zero Mission, Super Metroid, and then Metroid Fusion.
All right, the 16-bit Metroids.
To me, these are the best Metroid games.
Mm-hmm. The best Metroid games.
The best Metroid, definitely the best trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
The tightest, tell the most interesting story with the most interesting mechanics, and the most consistently interesting and well thought out games.
Yeah, and I think those 3 games also sort of typify the Metroid in the Metroidvania, right? Like Super Metroid more or less is like the first time that we actually see that style of gameplay really in the Metroid series. Yeah, this one was also on my list, so I'm going to go and take it off my list.
Well, and it's very specifically not like the first Metroid game, because I don't think that game is very much fun to revisit.
Yeah, and I mean also pointedly, the second one, Return of Samus, is not on here. Yeah, I think it makes sense that like all of that they can be unified by the kind of graphical identity as well as like how you play them.
Yeah, and Super Metroid was, kind of still is the pinnacle of the series in a lot of ways. And so when they were able to take that and then work backwards,
yes,
before like doing a sequel to it,
yes,
it like makes total sense to remake the original Metroid game in the style of Super Metroid.
Yeah, and then on top of that, and I mean in a way that is like Godfather, right? That like the first one starts kind of in the middle of the story, and then we go back for the second entry, and then the third one is I mean, Fusion's great. Don't get me wrong.
Fusion's better than Godfather 3.
Fusion is, look, this is the official canon Nintendo Cartridge Society stance. Metroid Fusion is better than Godfather 3.
In the ranking of all things in the universe.
Yes, that's right. On the big list of things in the universe, Metroid Fusion is above Godfather 3. Great list, or great trilogy, and deserving of a spot on both of our lists.
Yeah, because I considered for a little bit putting Metroid Prime on here, the Metroid Prime trilogy, instead of these games. But what I finally settled on was like, and if you go back to our ranking the Metroids episode, I don't really like the third one all that much. Corruption.
Yeah. I don't actually recall how we ended up ranking them, but I think pretty low, right? Like we put the original Prime
That one went very high.
That one goes very high. The original Prime is a great game. I think that it maybe looks a little worse in the light of its sequels than better. It is. Prime is like the Matrix, right? Where you're like, hey, this first one's great. And then the second two, you're like, I guess I can see parts of them that I like, but like, overall, I'm out.
But they make me appreciate what was so right about the first one.
Absolutely. So that's another thing that's on our board is Metroid
the ranking
Prime
of all things
equals the Matrix. All right. So for my second trilogy, this one's a little more abstract, so forgive me. Tetris on the Game Boy, Dr. Mario on the Game Boy and the NES, and Wario's Woods on the NES. A trilogy of block-dropping Nintendo puzzle games.
So, can you explain to me how Wario's Woods works? I'm not super familiar with it. Is it just basically a Tetris game?
More or less. So the way Wario's Woods works is you control Toad, who like walks along the bottom of the screen and like climbs up the towers of blocks that are falling, and you rearrange things as they fall down. So and you're trying to line up 3 like enemies that you're trying to get rid of with 1 bomb, or it can be more than 1 bomb. And so like he can climb up towers of things and place bombs or enemies on top of each other. You're controlling just like the little dude running around the bottom as the blocks fall on top of you. So it's a fun twist on the idea of the falling block puzzle game. And you still use like the how things are falling to your advantage and like clear rows and stuff. But I like, for me, that's what makes it like the evolution of this like kind of trilogy of ideas. With Dr. Mario, taking like Mario, basically just putting Mario right in a falling block game, and just like kind of tweaking the Tetris formula a little bit, and still being like very simple and all about things falling. But yeah, that's my whole case for that being a trilogy.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
Right.
They're all like falling block puzzle games that kind of build on each other.
Yeah.
But okay, sorry, just to go back real fast. Wario's Woods, Wario is
the bad guy.
The bad guy.
Right.
And he's the one that is dropping these things onto Toad?
Only when you get to the boss levels. Before that, in all other levels, it's Birdo.
But they are his woods.
Yes. You're going into Wario's Woods. And
have you been lured there? Are you there under false pretenses?
Ooh, I'm not totally up on the lore of Wario's Woods. But each level is a tree that like you go into. And Birdo drops these things on you for the first 4 levels, and then it's Wario, and then 4 levels with Birdo, Wario, 4 levels.
When did Birdo and Wario become?
When did they team up?
Yeah.
Probably Mario Tennis sometime.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. They're definitely doubles partners. For sure.
I think Birdo is doubles partners with Yoshi. And then Wario and
That's weird,
Waluigi.
Because they're not the same. They're not the same thing.
No, but they're both like dinosaur things, right?
I guess. That seems like a pretty broad category.
You think I'm painting with too broad a brush?
I'm not you. They probably are doubles partners. I just hope it was by choice and not by like they were like,
sure.
Oh, you two look alike.
Like, oh, you two are sort of dinosaurs, both kind of ambiguous with gender. So we'll pair you guys together.
Okay, so my second trilogy is I have 2 Zelda trilogies in here.
Oh, all right.
The first one is A Link to the Past.
Okay.
Ocarina of Time. And Twilight Princess.
So basically the same game 3 times.
Yes.
Okay. This is a great trilogy and a great justification for why they're a trilogy, but go ahead.
So they are all incredible games in their own right. Link to the Past is my personal favorite of the 3, but I think of the formula that these 3 games kind of like riff on, that Twilight Princess is, I guess, like the fulfillment of that vision.
Yes.
Once you look past like the slow beginning section, like we get it,
right?
Not
kind
great.
Of the bummer like overworld segments. Like there's the dungeons in Twilight Princess are like pinnacle Zelda dungeon,
And
right?
I think there's absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think there is a lot to like in some of the overworld sections.
Mhm.
There are times in that game that I was so incredibly frustrated by the overworld segments and by like I don't even know if we count this as the overworld segment, but that like escort mission with the
Yep.
um
The cart,
wagon. Oh,
carrying like the Prince Rudo of the
just
Zoras. Yeah.
absolutely terrible. But what Twilight Princess does good, it does so incredibly good.
Mm-hmm.
And look, Ocarina of Time is obviously an amazing game, and it is a milestone for video games. But even with the 3D remake, it's not that fun for me personally to revisit.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer Link to the Past. I prefer Twilight Princess.
That's interesting. With the 3D remake, I find Ocarina to be totally like awesome game to revisit. Did I wonder if you can just shed a little light on why uh like Wind Waker gets left out of that like obviously chronologically you skip over Wind Waker to make that trilogy work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that's like what makes Wind Waker not part of that trilogy?
Well, the answer to that question will come further in my list
When you introduce another
when I introduce
Zelda
another trilogy.
trilogy.
But also just because like when you think of the mechanics of those three games,
Mm-hmm.
it's very much they are telling the same story
Yes.
using the same um world, basically using the same like light dark mechanics, and I don't feel like Wind Waker fits
Yeah, well, and
in that regard.
even the aesthetic difference, right? The like the Toon Link that is enough too. Uh I was also I was considering for a little bit you doing a trilogy of the Hero of Time. So
Oh, sure.
starting with Ocarina of Time and then Majora's Mask as the part 2 and then part 3 being Twilight Princess, because the skeleton warrior who teaches you all of the extended like hero techniques is canonically the spirit of that Link come back to like train the new Link. So like I like that those worlds do seem connected. And Ocarina of Time is very much just Link to the Past 3D, like in so many ways.
And I feel like Twilight Princess is the perfection,
Yes.
arguably, but like the perfection of what Ocarina of Time set out to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've talked about before, how the NES is not maybe that great to like that fun to revisit, but the Super Nintendo is amazing because the same people who were working on the NES were given the tools that they needed to really fulfill the promise of those NES games.
Yes.
And I feel like Twilight Princess is kind of the same thing. Ocarina of Time, is for a lot of people the greatest game of all time, but I
Mhm.
think with Twilight Princess they were really able to blow out that world, maybe too much,
Yeah,
but
for
they were
sure.
able to say like, here's what we could do in Ocarina of Time and here's what we can do like 10 years later.
Right. Well, and maybe I would be willing to bet that the only reason that Twilight Princess favor or compares unfavorably to Ocarina is just the years in which they were released, right? Like if somehow in some magical universe they were both to magically released for the first time now, that we would be like, oh yeah, Twilight Princess is obviously a better game.
I mean, I think there is something to the simplicity of Ocarina of Time.
Mhm.
And like because they were working with more limitations, there is less like bloat, I
Yeah.
guess you could say, than there is in Twilight Princess. It's much more like sleek, clearly
There's
defined game.
bloat
But
in all those games, in both those 3D
I mean,
games.
Ocarina of
guess.
Time is not exactly the most fast paced.
Right.
Game.
It'll take you a long time to get through
Yeah.
it. All right, my next trilogy. It was my number 3 was going to be the Metroid one. But instead, I will go with this alternate, or no, not this alternate, just the next one on my list: Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., Donkey Kong 94.
Oh, great.
So I'm skipping over the Donkey Kong 3, which is a game that I bring up on this podcast almost every week, but isn't very good, and doesn't feature Mario in any way, and also doesn't really feature any of the gameplay from the first two Donkey Kong games. I'm a big fan of Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr., and I love that sort of simple one screen platforming kind of score based challenge. And I think the original Donkey Kong is probably the stronger game. But two builds on Donkey Kong Jr.'s like mobility over Mario's in the first one, maybe making it a slightly more complicated and then therefore like less sleek game. But I think a lot of those like changes to mobility inform Mario's new abilities in Donkey Kong 94, which is the Game Boy Color release of Donkey Kong, where it almost becomes like a puzzle platformer, in that you have to utilize all of Mario's different abilities, like a backflip or a triple jump or whatever, to really get around the map. Still, these like very simple. They're no longer just like single screen levels, but still very simple levels where like you can see it all laid out in front of you, and it's just about traversing it. So yeah, that one almost seems like it is, a more obvious direct sequel to the original Donkey Kong, but I think is very obviously informed by Donkey Kong Jr.
I've never played Donkey Kong 94 before. I've heard, especially recently, only really amazing things about it. And is it available on Virtual Console?
On the 3DS,
on
yeah.
the 3DS.
And is absolutely worth checking out. It kind of birthed the Mario versus Donkey Kong series, which early in its run was, more of that style of gameplay, and then eventually turned into this like March of the Minis, which is more like Lemmings gameplay, which is still fun, but kind of loses the one-to-one control over the characters aspect of it. So it's weird that like Donkey Kong 94 kind of starts to morph the series into something I don't like, but in that moment is sort of like the perfect balance of this one kind of thing that I like and this other thing that it was.
So it's like the Resident Evil 4 of Donkey Kong games.
Yeah, it is like the Resident Evil 4 of Donkey Kong games, and is really the fourth Donkey Kong game, right?
Yeah.
I wonder how deep these parallels go, Mark. That'll be a future episode. How is Donkey Kong identical?
Mere mortals should not dabble. All right. Well, okay, so I'll just go ahead and follow up my first Legend of Zelda pick with my second one.
Let's bring it on.
Which is Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks.
All right. Now, you're not a big fan of Spirit Tracks, right?
It is definitely probably, I won't say my least favorite Zelda game, but yeah, I did not love it.
It's tough because we have these rankings recorded somewhere.
Yeah.
I can't remember what they are.
Oh, no, I definitely remember. I don't like Spirit Tracks that much. But I do admire what they were trying to do with it. It's also kind of like, it's a loose fit in here, and I guess it's more Spirit Tracks is here like aesthetically. Wind Waker and Phantom Hourglass are very directly linked, as in Phantom Hourglass is a direct sequel to Wind Waker.
Yes.
Spirit Tracks takes place like 100 years after.
Was that right?
Phantom Hourglass?
I don't remember that. That it's a different character.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and there are links, no pun intended, to the first two games. But mostly it's kind of like an aesthetic choice, and you're existing in that same world where these other characters existed.
And it like controls the same way too, right?
Yeah, and like Tetra is there and all that kind of stuff.
Is Linnebeck, that's his name, right? The guy who's the captain of the ship
I think so. Because
again, he's there? Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay.
But basically, I like this because it
that'd be a good Smash character. Oh, we got to go back and re-record.
Oh, that would be
Linnebeck would be such a good Smash character.
That'd be a great Smash character. Or Tetra.
Yeah. Sorry, keep going.
No. Basically, just like Wind Waker, when it was revealed and when it was kind of like reviled.
Yeah.
And Nintendo pretty quickly, even though the game came out and was like fairly successful and is now well regarded, Nintendo pretty quickly walked away from Toon Link.
Yeah.
And yeah, he would show up as like a bonus character in some things, but they got the message loud and clear that people did not want this like cell shaded Link.
Mm-hmm.
But he's such a great character.
Yeah,
and he's so
Mhm.
expressive. Like the characters in that game, especially for the time, were so interesting and like intricate in a way that 3D realistic Link maybe still is not, even in the Breath of the Wild.
This is right. Like normal, whatever you want to call him. He's obviously not photorealistic, but the sort of normal proportion Link is not a super interesting character. I can't think of a non-Toon Link game that characterizes the main character well, right? It makes me, like we were just saying that there are all these different flavors of Mario game, and we'd like to see them all continue going forward. I would like to see them make a new Toon Link game.
And for a while they were, and that's why it was so great. You know, that's why it was Phantom Hourglass. I think is so much fun. The Ocean King didn't bother me. I know some
revisiting
people,
it, yeah.
Yeah, I know that is a deal breaker for a lot of people. For me, it didn't bother me at all. I thought they did really interesting things with the DS. I remember that part, and to solve the puzzle, you have to like close the clamshell so that way the seal or whatever it was could like go from one screen to the other. Like stuff like that was so cool. But
Here's
most
a
of all,
question
I
for
just
you.
loved the Wind Waker world, and so seeing it come back in a new adventure was great. Sorry, what was your question?
So you can play DS games on a 3DS, right? So you can play DS games on a 2DS. How do you close it?
Can you play 2DS? Can you play DS games on a 2DS?
I don't know why you wouldn't be able to.
Doesn't it
require back? I mean, I don't know. I assume that the 2DS continues to be backwards compatible to DS.
You're right. It probably is. I don't know.
With this, we need to investigate this.
Well, dear listener, if you know,
yes, you can write into us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. Mark, that's a good trilogy. Should we move on to my next?
Yep.
All right. This one throwing you a curveball, Mark. This trilogy: Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advanced.
Whoa!
It's a hardware trilogy.
Threw your phone
threw
down
my phone
in triumph.
And now I'm gesturing wildly to the left and to the right. So the whole Game Boy line, right? Obviously sunsetted when the DS was announced, and I guess when it was proven to be successful. For a while, it was a 3-pillar strategy.
Really hedging their bets there.
Really hedging their bets. No, we still have Game Boys. But I mean that for me, like, does such a good job of defining like the role that Nintendo dug out for themselves in the market, and that they still, like a lot of the reason for the Switch's success is the fact that it is kind of a portable thing. And so Game Boy being so limited in its hardware and what the thing could actually pull off, and just the gradual upgrade to the Game Boy Color and reiterating on all of the things that made the original Game Boy successful, and for being like a weird little middle child between the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance, the Game Boy Color had some huge games on it. Donkey Kong 94 is on there, which we've already talked about. Pokemon Yellow, also Silver and Gold. Those are Game Boy Color games. Just huge games, right? That just like perpetuated this thing. And then the Game Boy Advance, I know you love that machine. It's great, and had so many like classic Nintendo and Super Nintendo games on it, plus a cool library of its own with all these like RPGs and stuff. Yeah, like it's hard for me to think of like Nintendo trios without including the Game Boy family of systems.
Yeah, each is an incredible system in its own right, which is really remarkable for the Game Boy Color, because it really was kind of a way to extend the Game Boy, the original Game Boy's life. And yeah, it worked so well.
It worked incredibly well. And just like Yeah, it's the sort of thing that makes me, whenever we talk about like the new direction for classic consoles, like if they did a Game Boy Classic, like would it be a Game Boy Classic, Game Boy Color Classic? Is that too much? Is the combined libraries of the Game Boy and the Game Boy
I think
Color
it'd be
too
too
big?
hard, but I
Yeah.
don't know that like on a practical level you could do a Game Boy and a Game Boy Color
Just
Classic
separately,
Edition.
yeah.
But I think they both have libraries that would justify it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially like you would have to do like Advance would have to be its own thing.
Oh yeah, that the Advance could be its own thing, but Game Boy Color and Game Boy, like there would be so many like stone cold classics on there. You'd have 3 Zelda games, right? 3 good Zelda games, which I guess could be another trilogy. I don't have it on my list, but you've already got 2 Zelda trilogies. But the Link's Awakening and Oracle of Ages and Seasons are all like phenomenal games.
So I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball.
Oh, right. I love curveballs.
All right. So mine trilogy, this is like the loose one that actually kind of breaks the trilogy rules. But it's Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, and World Class Track Meet.
Yes. A trilogy released, I mean, not at the same time, because those games have different release years.
So the reason why it is a trilogy in my mind is because, and when I was doing research for this, I actually learned that my family got the NES much later than I thought we did, because in 1990 there was a Nintendo Entertainment System bundle basically that was released that came with the system, a Zapper gun, a power pad, and on one cart it had Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, and World Class Track Meet. And that is the system my family must have purchased, which comes much later than I realized.
So this is the system that we had as well. This is the one that my parents purchased for us. So yeah, totally for me, this is like a quintessential Nintendo trilogy.
Yeah, so like on one cartridge, you would have these 3 games, and when you put the cartridge in, you could like press left or right on the D-pad, and it would take you to basically like not a title screen, but just a logo for each of these 3 games, and then you could hit start or select, and it would bring you into the game itself. And man, we rented a lot of games. We didn't own a ton of Nintendo games, but this was one that I put so much time into.
Oh my god, yeah. Yeah, and it's so neat that like each one of them is a wholly different game experience, right? Complete with a different way to interact with it, different ways to control it. And between the Zapper and the Power Pad, it's sort of like, I don't know, it represents like Nintendo's like innovation where control is involved, sometimes for better or for worse, right? Like when you're a kid, you're always cheating with World Class Track Meet, right? Like pounding with your fists to like make them run fast or jump by just lifting your arms off.
I was always mystified by the Power Pad in general, because the only game I ever saw that worked with it was this World Class Track Meet, and it had rows of buttons.
Yes.
That you never. What was the utility of all of those? And then you flipped it over, and it had a whole nother configuration.
For like some aerobics game
or like something that I never saw. So there was so much like mystery in the Power Pad. It felt like powerful.
Yeah, it felt like, what's going on here? But that's another example of almost like a hardware trilogy of the NES controller, the NES Zapper, and the Power Pad.
Yeah, as the generations went on, like there was like the Super Scope for the SNES,
the Super Nintendo.
But the peripherals until the Wii era really kind of died off. It wasn't so much of a thing, whereas like for that first generation, peripherals were a huge part of the Nintendo experience.
Right, and we're not even talking about the Power Glove. We're not talking about the U-Force. You remember the U-Force?
No.
U-Force was like I guess it's sort of like a laptop, which is what I'm thinking because there's one in front of me right now. Where you like put your hands like in the field generated by it, and like you could move your hand up and it would read as up, or like your hand down and it would read as
wow,
down.
no. I mean, not even to mention Rob
Oh yeah, Rob the Robot. Yeah, that's right. He would spin your little discs for you and push buttons for Gyromite.
Yeah, so maybe it was a holdover from Nintendo's push to like position the NES as more of a toy
Yeah.
than a video game system. But for whatever reason, those days, like, I guess we were able to revisit them with the Wii when there was lots of like useless plastic things you could attach to your Wiimote and swing around like a tennis racket or.
Yeah, like an idiot. I will count that. I have no argument from me, Mark. That's I think a perfect trilogy.
We broke all the rules and we love it.
We love it. Okay, so I have one more. We're doing 5 of each of these. So I've got 3 different ones to choose from, Mark.
Well, we'll come back and revisit all of them. Right?
We'll revisit all. So here's one that I'm going to call. I'm not going to call it anything. It starts with Final Fantasy Adventure on the Game Boy, and then moves to The Secret of Mana on the Super NES, and then concludes with The Secret of Evermore, also on the NES. All developed by Square, all on Nintendo platforms. The studio within Square that developed Evermore is like an American or possibly a European studio. It's not the like main Japanese.
Yeah, it was a Western studio for sure.
Yeah. And it is obviously a like Western take on the Secret of Mana formula, and is like a sort of monster movie sci-fi version of that sort of role-playing adventure game that started very primitively in the Game Boy Final Fantasy Adventure, which was, I mean, that's technically part of that same series.
Just retitled for America.
Retitled, yeah. And yeah, there is a third. There actually is a Secret of Mana trilogy, but we didn't see part 3.
Seiken Densetsu or something.
Seiken Densetsu, I think, is correct. But we never saw the end of it here. But we got something totally different, and that to this day I still think is more fun than Secret of Mana.
Yeah, like, you're a big Secret of Evermore booster.
I love it. I've got the cart, and you and I should play it someday.
I've never played it before.
I think it's more fun, and the 2 characters in it are, first of all, it's just 2 at a time instead of 3, which is a little bit more manageable. And the 2 characters are the kid and his dog. And the dog transforms from world to world because it's like this magical place. So like, I don't know, it's got more, it is both simpler and more inventive at the same time. Instead of having like 3 characters and like some kind of weird dialogue, it's knowingly cheesy and like plays to all these like sci-fi tropes. And then there's this dog that transforms as you go from world to world. You're in a caveman world and he's like a big hulking like wolf dog. And then you go to a like fancy medieval world and he's like a pink those dogs that had the puffy ones that in dog shows. Help me out here.
Poodles?
Yes, poodle is correct. He turns into a poodle and then eventually into a like toaster shaped robot dog.
We should definitely play it. I would love to because it's a game I haven't experienced at all. Does it follow the same kind of like tropes of Secret of Mana, or I guess Square RPGs in general at this time, where there's a lot of like science and nature coming together to form some weird technology?
So not really. It's the conceit of the game is that your uncle or whatever is an inventor who invented a machine that allows people to enter realities of their own design. And so he invites his like 4 most interesting friends over, and they all create their own worlds. And so you stumble into their worlds. So it is technology leading you to these. One person was an archaeologist. And so you go to, actually, I guess a couple of them are archaeologists. But so, you go to this prehistoric world that like the little girl imagined for herself. And then you go to like an Egypt kind of level, which is where like the scientist archaeologist, that's the world that he made for himself. So like thematically, no, I would say it's actually quite different from the regular Square stuff.
Yeah, we should check it out.
It's a cool game.
Sounds really interesting. So my final trilogy is one that I've talked about before on this show a lot. I love it. I keep bringing it up because even though it's readily available, I want more people to experience it. It's the Phoenix Wright trilogy.
Yeah.
On, for me, the Nintendo DS. Yeah, Phoenix Wright, Ace Attorney, Justice for All, and Trials and Tribulations.
So those are 1, 2, and 3, right?
Those are 1, 2, and 3. They were all released on the DS. I think there's a trilogy collection that's out on the 3DS. They're all available on like iOS and Android. They are so much fun. I can't endorse all like the spin-offs and all that kind of stuff, but these first 3 games are I don't know, for me they really like scratched an itch of like point and click adventure games
Yeah.
in a time when those weren't being made. Like I think the first Ace Attorney game came out on the DS in America around the same time that like the Strong Bad Telltale game came out on WiiWare.
Yeah, that sort of tracks. Maybe even a little bit earlier.
And so obviously like there were on consoles there were like the beginnings of this resurgence in point and click adventure games, but it was still a ways off before they were really popular. And so that was really fun to revisit kind of like that idea from my childhood, but it also introduced me to, I guess, like visual novels, which I had never. There's a lot of dialogue in these games. Like interacting with characters is the majority of the game and is like the fun
Right.
of the
That's
game.
the prime way you interact with it. Yeah.
But the localizations in these first 3 games are really well done. They're a lot of fun. The characters are great. The mysteries are interesting. The mechanics of the game are unique and fun. I really like. For some reason, this is like a trilogy that really brings me a lot of joy.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's a lot of fun.
Are there games from beyond the original trilogy that you're like, oh, kind of a bummer I can't include that in like my trilogy here, or is it really just like that core?
Yeah, I mean there have been spin-off games. There's a character named Miles Edgeworth who is a great character who got like a Miles Edgeworth investigate or Ace Attorney investigation, something like that, like spin-off series. There was a Professor Layton and Ace Attorney mashup crossover game that I don't think ever got localized. But no, there's also like Apollo Justice, which was kind of a sequel, kind of a spin-off with a different lead character still in the same universe. A lot of these games are good and a lot of them are fun, but none of them
capture that magic like
of
the
first 3 for sure.
How do they do they like grow and change from like one to the next, or is it basically just like the same formula repeated 3 times?
They are these first 3 games are very similar. The kind of I don't know that mechanically there's a lot of growth. I think what's really interesting is that the story or like the lore of the series it's serialized. Like,
interesting.
There is like an overarching or an arc for all of the characters throughout the game, and there are like consequences to choices. Basically, if you like succeed, it's not like there's alternate endings or anything.
Yeah.
But like when you play through the game, you see the story of these characters and how they grow and change. And it's all like goofy and lighthearted, but there is murder, and I don't know, there's just like something fun about that combination.
Yeah.
That just makes it a really great series. If you have ever been interested, even if you don't pick it up on a Nintendo console, they're for sure worth checking out.
Another fine entry. We did so good, Mark. I think we came up with 10 great trilogies. Here are 2 more. All right, so this one is super loose, which is why it didn't make it onto like my main list. And it includes a game that most of these games have sequels. So Star Tropics, Earthbound, Contact.
I've never played Contact.
So
it's the DS.
It's a DS game,
by Grasshopper or some like weird some studio that.
Yeah, it is some studio like that. But so all of these games to me share a similar sensibility that is not too different from like Secret of Evermore. The sort of like American kid thrown into like modern day kid thrown into like kind of weird sci-fi-ish stuff. And obviously where this gets tricky is Star Tropics has a sequel, Star Tropics 2, and Earthbound has both a game before it and a game after. If we were in Japan, it could have just been the Mother trilogy, and I could have just claimed that. But so that's kind of my like weak workaround for that. And
no, I love it. I think that's a great list because again, having not played Contact, but I feel like especially those first two, there is such a connection in the way that it's like Japanese developers, like filtering their ideas about American culture, and
yeah.
it makes for it's a little bit like a funhouse mirror version of the world where like you can see yourself in it in a weird way, but it's like instead of being realistic, it's like fun and heartwarming, if that makes sense.
Yes, it's just abstracted enough for it to be like something that you can really connect with. And like just weird little things that recur from them, like both Ness and Mike use yo-yos and bats to it, like these things that like what are the Japanese thinking of us where they're like they use yo-yos, right? I don't know, it's all very like idiosyncratic, and it's weird that those similarities pop up.
When you were describing Secret of Evermore, I was getting very Star Tropics vibes from it.
Yes, and obviously I'm a big fan of Star Tropics, so it would you know what? Let's take Contact off my list and put Secret of Evermore. It cap both those trilogies.
More Evermore.
And then of course my final alternate is Donkey Konga 2, and Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. Because I'm a sucker for controlling anything with those bongo drums. Man, that's fun.
I never played Jungle Beat. I had the original Donkey Konga and Peripheral, obviously.
Right. The original Donkey Konga I had so much fun with that my buddy Paul and I went out and bought 3 extra bongos so we could play it 4-player. Which is insane. No, I don't know anyone. I've never met another human being or heard of another human being who had 4 sets of bongo drums. Because it's just insane. And like, it's too much noise when you get 4 of those in one room. It doesn't make any sense. But I played so much of that original game that even though the song list in the second game is far worse, it doesn't really have any cool, like the first one had like that cool like Samba Mario remix, and the Zelda theme was in there, and like Pokemon theme, all these like cool Nintendo things.
Yeah, you can listen to at least one of those if you go back to I think our original music episode that we did about a year ago.
I did pulled the Zelda one, I believe, which is great. And then Jungle Beat is the last of them where you control Donkey Kong running around.
It's a platformer.
With the bongo drums. It doesn't necessarily work.
Well, in fact, it's a platformer that was developed by, at the time, EAD Tokyo, and it was the game that got them the job of developing for the core Mario series, and we got Super Mario Galaxy out of that.
Perfect. Hey guys, great trajectory. So maybe that's a different trilogy. Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, Galaxy 1, Galaxy 2. All right, Mark, we've been talking trilogies for a good long time, so let's get in position to close out this episode. Certainly, we missed some trilogies. Notably, we didn't mention Mario 1, 2, and 3, or Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, 3. But whatever. If you have trilogies that you think that we missed beyond those 2 super obvious ones.
Well, and we didn't miss Donkey Kong Country.
Oh.
Right? We purposely left it off our list.
I could make a case for Donkey Kong Country Returns, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze.
Oh, yeah. I
could make a case for that trilogy.
I would feel okay about that.
So don't use that one either. But tweet at us at Nincart Society, right on the Facebook page, Nintendo Cartridge Society, or just send us an email, Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. And let us know what we missed. I'm sure there are a bunch. Kid Icarus, there are 3 of those games. There's another one. But who really cares about the second or the first for that matter? Mark, we're done with this episode. Please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. If you like Mark and Mine's opinions, we write about comic books on retconpunch.com. Olivia Duncan made our logo. Our music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can check out more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Ellers saying thanks for listening.
What's a Creative Podcast Network?